Hello, everyone, and welcome to our University Business Web Seminar here today, which is entitled Fast, Simple, and Secure: How to Drive a Better Payments Experience for Students and Staff. And all of this is brought to you by the generous support of our sponsor here today, ACI Worldwide. Now, before we get started, I would just like to share just a few housekeeping items, and then we'll go right to the presentation. If at any time you need any technical support today, please just use the chat panel, which you can find. It's on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Then you just select on my name, which is Stephen Blackburn, and then just type in your message, and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. I'm also about to submit a phone number as well as the access code in the chat, and you'll be able to dial those numbers in if you want to listen in privately or if you don't have any speakers, so you can look out for that in a moment. We will also be welcoming any questions you have today with a Q&A session that will be happening at the end of the presentation, and you'll have the opportunity to enter your questions throughout the presentation, not at the very end. So whenever a question comes to mind, please feel free to input it there. You can submit a question by using the Q&A panel, and that's at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Then send your questions to all panelists. If you don't see the chat or the Q&A panels, just again, look to the bottom right-hand side of your screen, then just click on the expand triangle, and that should be directly in front of the panel name to make sure you have access to it. Also, the last point I'd like to make, and then we'll get started, is that if you would like to access the web seminar at a later time, you'd be pleased to know that everyone who is here and everyone who registered, all of you will receive an email from us at UB at some point, most likely tomorrow, with a link to the slides as well as an archive recording. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers that we have here today. We have Steve Mounce, who is the Director of Product Marketing, ACI Worldwide, and we also have Scott Campbell, who is Senior Business Development Executive also at ACI Worldwide. Hi, Scott and Steve. Nice to have you with us today. We really appreciate it. Oh, I think you're currently muted. Sorry about that.
That's probably better. You guys can probably hear me now. Thank you, Stephen, for hosting us today, as well as everybody at University Business. We really appreciate the partnership that we have with UB. And as you mentioned, I'm joined today by Scott Campbell. Scott Campbell is one of our in-house subject matter experts on higher education payments. So good to have you on board here, Scott. And as Stephen mentioned, we're going to talk about fast, simple, and secure, how you can drive a better payments experience for not only your students, but also your staff. And again, so we'll give you a little bit of background on our consumer research. We'll walk through how our students grading the payment experience here in 2022. We'll give you some tips on how you can become best in class in payments. We'll talk a little bit about and walk you through kind of an example we have on a college that we worked with to ensure compatibility and compliance with their payments process. And then as Stephen mentioned, we've got time at the end to answer your questions. So please feel free to add those to the Q&A box as we go along. So again, as Director of Product Marketing, I lead consumer research for our biller segment. And our primary research is our ACI SpeedPay Pulse study. Within that study, we survey over 3,000 consumers twice a year, and we ask them about their billing, their payment, and their communication preferences. We share those results twice a year, or once a year through an annual report. We produce several trend reports each year, and we're going to share with you, we've got a really cool interactive website where you can see the trends over time and you can dig into specific trends by the different industries. We also work with YouGov to conduct what we call quick surveys. As trends change, we work with YouGov to get surveys out the door and the results in pretty quickly when there's a topic we want to dive even deeper into. And Scott, can you maybe tell us a little bit about how the class of 23, the class of 25, how they're grading today's payment experience?
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve. Again, I'm Scott Campbell with ACI, and I work very closely with our higher ed schools. I have about 15 years of experience on campus and now 10 here at ACI. And it's really exciting to talk about the student experiences, the student satisfaction surveys, really because it will help you as a school really assess your institutional strategies. First, answering, do you have a payment strategy and an e-commerce program? And second, how can you continually reinvest and improve upon it? But where we'll start really is a great place that I think really helps shape the conversation we're having today. What we're looking at today is a survey that was done jointly between the Wall Street Journal and the Times Higher Education, where they surveyed over 170,000 students across the US. And specifically, they were asking them on these categories to give grades ranging from a +1 to a -1, really just to see what their learning experiences and their overall satisfaction was at school. With no surprise, and I certainly think it would be a relief to all institutions on the call today, where the students very much thought highly of their experiences were in their class size, the academic support, course content, really what we think of predominantly as the offering of an institution. Where they did not score as highly for the overall satisfaction, to no surprise, really falls into the cost, the living costs, financial aid. And I think there's no surprise there, but there's reasons there. A lot of it, and we're pointing out here, and it's really where ACI plays a particular partner role with our schools, is that the online resources have room for improvement. Students were not all that satisfied with the online resources available. And this is a broad segment. It could be anything from the mobile technologies available, information and course content, or information about content on their websites. So just in general, we know a key area where students would suggest schools focus on some improvement could be simply that, on your online resources. And we'll go to the next slide. And, very much so, we'll talk a lot about the demographics and the ranges of the population. But so much of our traditional educational programs are filled with Gen Z today. Gen Z is a very unique population. And, at least in the traditional population, we know for your traditional 4-year, 2-year community colleges, Gen Z is what we're really focusing on. The data from our own ACI Pulse survey is depicted here. And it's really just a general snapshot of overall satisfaction of paying their bills. No surprise, they're seeing smaller price tags on things that they're very involved on day to day. Think of subscription services as your Netflix, your Hulu accounts. We all know that that's the predominant way that our students in Gen Z are viewing all their TV these days. But they're satisfied. These are set and forget it types of payments that they really don't have to keep an eye on. As you look lower down to like student loans, higher education tuition expenses, significantly less satisfied with the types and ways in which these biller opportunities, these options are. That gives us room for improvement in areas like, in the bursar's office, are they having all the information available to them, or do they actually have to come in and online? Do they have to talk on the telephone? So really a lot of our focus will be here on this educational tuition and expenses area, and preferences, ways in which the students are demanding, and how we can improve that. And here's a perfect place to start. Do our students depicted here in the different generational brackets, do they find payment experiences simple? And the answer is no, they don't. You see 30% of Gen Z, a third of all Gen Z payers, are finding bill payment experiences complicated. We all know with a student that we're serving, the last thing we want them to do is have areas outside of their academic curriculum be distracting. So here's a very key area to say, how can we make their bill payment experiences less complicated? And a lot of that, again, goes back to the ways that we've talked about. One thing in this survey here we thought was very interesting is that oftentimes this Gen Z, when they find it complicated to pay their bills, either online, on their phone, they want to talk in person. So they'll abandon their mobile experience and come in online. So your schools online mobile experiences are actually backfiring and creating more lines on your campus in your student accounts or registrar services offices. So the last thing we want are bill payments to be considered complicated, and that's an area of ACI expertise. How can we make it seamless and streamlined?
Scott, you brought up a really good point. Again, I work with all different industries, and when we look between industries, higher education has some of the highest rates of in-person payments, whether it's at the bursar's office or somewhere like Walgreens where you can pay in cash. They also have a lot of phone payments, CSR-driven payments. So as you mentioned, Scott, if they can't figure it out online, these are big dollars that we're talking about. They're either going to pick up the phone or they're going to go get in line down at the office.
That's absolutely true, Steve. And I think it's always true to important to note that it's not just Gen Z that our schools and our systems are supporting. Millennials, Gen X, even boomers in more of your non-traditional programs, continuing ed, certificate programs, and even graduate professional degrees, they're finding it easier to pay, which you find it interesting. They're paying how they want, but they're just not needing this type of hand-holding that we see with our Gen Z population. That's that's just something for us to keep in our back pocket as we walk through this data.
Right.
So here's another thing, faster payments. The speed is so important as you look at these millennials and the Gen Zs. Think of it this way. When a few students that are sitting around ordering a pizza together, they're not sharing cash to pay the bill. They're Venmoing or they're using a Cash App to share it back and forth to one another. It's instant and they know it landed with their friend immediately. They expect the same from the institution. So here you see 57% of Gen Z are looking for that immediate payment. I'm paying it now. Perhaps I need to do it for an add drop experience to get a new class. Or even if I don't, I want to make sure that payment has posted. Here's another interesting fact is they're willing to pay for that expediency. Where you have a Gen Z saying, I'd much rather see that payment posted now and I want confirmation. You see the boomers and even Gen X saying, I'd rather save a $3 service fee or save any other type of fee implemented that would provide that immediate service, even if I have to wait a couple days. So again, we're having a very unique trend shown between what the expectations what the expectations are rather for the types of payments that the different generational brackets are paying for.
Yeah, Scott, and that brings us to this slide here. You mentioned that folks are checking their payment source immediately to make sure that payment posted. We're seeing it's probably because a lot more people are paying at the last minute. They want to make sure they're not getting hit with a late fee or a ding on their credit. As you can see here on the left, we've laid out our data going back to the fall of 2018. That's how long we've conducted the Pulse survey. So each year we conduct it twice. So each year we have two bars on the chart. And as you can see, we've gone up to 33% or 1 in 3 consumers has made a last minute payment or a same day payment in the last 12 months. And that's gone up from 1 in 4 just last fall. And if you take a look on the right, this is where we break out the most recent results by generation. No surprise that the younger generations are waiting to the last minute. It could be that inexperience, and this could be an indicator of just how thinly stretched folks are, living paycheck to paycheck, paying at that last minute. So again, we've seen an increase in this over time. And just so folks know, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I was just going to say something I always find interesting there, and it really follows up with what you're talking about being stretched thin. There's also, the characteristic of kind of having a balance of needs and wants. That we know the boomers were, very structured with regard to what their needs and balancing budgets of their households. And this is actually something that we see depicted here in that, only 14% of the boomers are making, last minute payments. Whereas Gen Z, they're also the ones using different types of, alternative payments or rather just, finding ways that they're buying and making consumer decisions very last minute. So that can also be put into the reason, the pile of reasons why, these last minute payments are being made.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of in a last minute on demand world when you think about it, Scott. I mean, you can order DoorDash, have food to you momentarily. If you want to watch a show, it's on demand on your TVs. So your payment should be too.
Or if you want to go and buy that laptop that, that 2-year-old MacBook that you have is not quite good enough, you go and you can then kind of returning to the old payment layaway programs. You can go and, buy as you pay, buy now, pay later. That's a whole nother thing that we could go a whole conversation on.
Right, right. All right. Digital wallets. We've seen a huge increase of digital wallet usage as well. This chart represents folks that use digital wallets. We asked how frequently do you use them? And you can see here, Gen Z, almost 70% use either Apple Pay or their Google Wallet once a week or more. Almost as strong with millennials, and we've seen a big increase just in the last 6 months from Gen X. I'm an Android guy, and I know I like to use my Google Wallet and Google Pay. It's just so easy to spend money with just the tap. So again, this is an area to watch. We've also got research too that shows that people aren't using digital wallets just for payments. They're using them for IDs. They're using them for access management. They're putting concert tickets in there, football tickets, things like that. So when you think of digital wallets, think beyond the payment, because this is really where students are gravitating to.
I know I have my daughter as a first year in college this year, and I think that for her to have a understanding of all the funding sources where things come from is a stretch. Having one single digital wallet is really, I think, expected for her. That depending on if I have cash in my bank account or if I need to use PayPal credit, it's all right there and convenient. I see it firsthand with my daughter.
Yeah. All right. One more. Here's another slide from the SpeedPay Pulse survey. The good news is we've asked folks about what do you feel about the security of your data when you're making bill payments. The good news is that a majority of folks feel that their data is more secure than it was 5 years ago, and almost 61% of millennials. However, when we dig in a little deeper, we've also asked folks, how do you keep track of your bill payment passwords? And you can see the boomers are writing them down, on paper, but surprisingly, about 1 in 4 Gen Z and 1 in 5 millennials are keeping track of their passwords on paper, which we know is not really the most secure method. We've also got folks that, Gen Z and millennials, that they'll use the same password across every single site, which again is not really a good best practice. So definitely room for opportunity for the students and parents themselves to improve bill payment security. And Scott, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you can become the best in class, get that A grade when it comes to billing and payments?
Absolutely. So I think now that we have an understanding of really some of the preferences, it's really important to really look at the trends of our, traditional and non-traditional age students. This again is a 5-year trend of our Pulse study going back to 2018, but seeing the different types of channels in which they prefer. I think it's very important to note that, the website is still, is still king, but it's losing its significance with the mobile technology, the mobile applications and services very much continuing to grow. Now, with all that said, we also know that phone, in person, and even by mail, as expensive as it might be, will never go away. But just again, the importance of the mobile technologies being very much a key part of your school technology focus. And also here, with really looking at the payment methods, this is a significant thing because whether your school is absorbing fees or passing them as service fees to your students, there's funds being diverted for the processing of this type. Credit cards, it is a predominant area of funding for our students, and it can be a cost savings for the institution. But debit cards certainly still, with 37% of the fund or the payments being made in that channel. ACH really remaining consistent, but I do think that with students not carrying checkbooks, some not even understanding what a routing number might be, it's important to know that the debit, ACH, and a balance of credit card convenience is really important. And once again, knowing paper checks, as few as paper checks might be in the checkbook of any Gen Z, or certainly our next generation Alpha won't have paper checks, but it's still some type of service that the school would have to offer. And then again, in mail, there are those that still like to, put that stamp on the envelope and send it in to have that real gratification that it's in the mail, the check is in the mail.
Kind of the opposite of the check is in the mail are alternative payment methods. We asked folks, we just started asking them in 2020, so we don't have a full 5 years of data here. But regardless, you can still see that upward trend in folks that have an interest in paying a bill with an alternative payment method. That could be an Apple Pay, it could be a PayPal, it could be something like Venmo. And of course, no surprise, all the younger generations show the strongest interest. And we've seen this as well at ACI. We're one of the largest payment processors for the good old Internal Revenue Service. And this year we were the first to launch payments through PayPal or Venmo. And we saw really strong adoption just right out of the gate. So again, leading indicators show this is not going to go away. It's just going to continue to rise as we go on.
And on this topic, I always think it's very interesting in that, ACI serves many different populations well outside of just higher ed. But it's always so interesting because in higher ed, you have students that are demanding some of the more new or, fast changing technologies. So it's always great to know that, the students are there and have high expectations that schools have to adapt to. But then you think of things like paying taxes in the IRS that perhaps wouldn't always be the quickest to adapt to change, yet they're doing it and they're being forced to. So we know again that, by seeing and the observation that ACI has, looking at students paying tuition, students paying for events on campus, all the way to, individual retiree paying their taxes, it's very interesting to see the trends and to know how and to be able to really help our partners adapt to those changes and understand, what the technology needs are, but also the security and compliance that comes along with it.
Yeah. All right. And we also looked at cryptocurrency for the first time in our survey this spring. We asked folks, do you think cryptocurrency payments in general are secure? Boomers, it's definitely a no, and kind of so-so for the younger generations. It looks like millennials have the most confidence in the security, but we also asked, would you like to pay a bill with cryptocurrency? And as you can see, pretty much a blank chart there on the right. Barely 1% of millennials and Gen X have any interest at this time in paying with crypto like Bitcoin. We're going to continue to watch this over time to see whether or not crypto actually takes off. With the volatility, we'll just have to see where that goes over the next few years.
Absolutely. I think there's only been one school of all the hundreds that we work with that have really explored the crypto with me as a consulting role. And, the volatility is key, but you have a lot of times in the alumni donations office, people saying, this is an area that we'd like to explore. So here we've talked a little bit about, the needs and expectations, but then also diving a little bit more into, as a higher ed school serving the students, how they like to pay. So I think a key takeaway from this first part of our conversation is really a self-assessment. How are you as an institution doing? And here are just some few questions that are really valid to ask yourself. First of all, do you have a payment strategy? How often have you been, exploring or improving upon expanding that payment strategy since maybe perhaps you first offered online payments? Are your students actually satisfied with the online resources that you're providing? Are they really able to pay where and whenever they want to? It's the seamless payment. It should not be a problem that has to be solved all the time. It should be convenient. The other thing is, are you offering the preferred payment channels? Are they really being able to use the channel at every point of payment on campus, whether it's tuition, buying the coffee at the cafe, or on Main Street at the pizza shop. Also, those alternative payment methods, are they available across campus? We know that the students are demanding them. That's a very familiar and common and expected way of payments. How are you doing? How do you stack up against some of these questions? And then finally, really, I think sometimes schools will put a program in place and think, great, we have that online or e-commerce program, we're good. But we all know that not only does the technology change constantly, the security and the compliance is really something that has to be paid attention to. So how does your institution prioritize that security and compliance for your payment offerings? Now, these are just a few, but really hopefully to get into that good practice of continually exploring the security, the safety, and the convenience of the payment options available at your school.
Yeah, good questions to ask yourself, like you said, Scott, to kind of evaluate where your school or college is at when it comes to payments and security.
Absolutely.
So speaking of payments and security and compliance and whatnot, Scott and I are going to kind of walk you through an example we had very recently with a college that we worked with that was under kind of a time crunch to make sure they stayed compliant. That college that we're referring to is Shasta College. Just to give you a little bit of background about them, you can see here on the map, they're in Northern California in Redding. They are a public community college founded in 1948. They've got just shy of 9,000 students. And Shasta was one of only 15 California community colleges that was selected to offer a 4-year bachelor's degree program back in 2015. So give you a little bit about Shasta. And Scott, give us a little bit of background on why they reached out to you, why they reached out to ACI, and what they were looking at.
Absolutely. So Shasta is unique in that it has not only that traditional population it's serving, but also non-traditional students on various campus locations or satellites, as well as online programs. And so, of course, they were exploring some of the, the technological needs of meeting those students, but they had a very urgent requirement. And this goes into that security or compliance area that we had mentioned earlier. Shasta was under the gun in the fact that they were not meeting the NACHA requirements that were coming after a year extension, were coming very strong at them earlier this year, with the deadline being March of the current year we're in. They knew these compliance changes were coming, but they didn't have a full understanding of what they meant to the institution, and they really didn't have a key strategy of how to make those changes. So when we began our conversation with Shasta, it was very much helping to allow them to understand what exactly these new requirements meant. The requirement was essentially having a validation on any of the ACH or the web debit payments that were coming through. They had to have a reasonable fraudulent transaction detecting system, which is a really fancy way to say validation for these. And their payments provider they were with for many years was not actually capable of doing that. So they came to us saying, we need to understand this, what it means to us. And what it did mean is that possible fine, certainly. But so it was a really great conversation for us to really sit down and say, what is your payment strategy? How is it going to look from an e-commerce and technology perspective, but also meeting this very critical demand for compliance updates? And what was great is that we had a very trusted and proven program of integration into the system of record they were using. Their SIS was Colleague by Ellucian, and it was something that we were able to really kick the project off quite quickly after we mutually agreed on what the strategy was going to be.
Scott, if I remember correctly, when we dug into Shasta's payment processing, didn't they? I think they had an issue with PCI compliance as well with some of their terminals that we helped them solve as well.
That's absolutely true. Oftentimes, and I have 15 years of quite a while ago, but when I was at schools, and I remember student assistants taking calls, writing credit card numbers on paper. They weren't quite there, but their point of sale system was not compliant. It was not being tokenized, and they were just using a secondary point of sale solution to accept credit card payments. Well, with our comprehensive type of payment solution that we were able to bring in, that point of sale capability was brought directly into the overall commerce and e-commerce program that we introduced onto campus.
Yeah, great story. You know, we've got what's called, I believe, a P2PE solution, where basically that terminal is tracked from the minute it's shipped to the minute it's installed. And when you can track it like that, that actually reduces some of your PCI, not only your exposure, but the controls that you have to report in to remain compliant. So
it
was
makes
great
it a lot easier for the staff. You know, granted, you'll never be able to get all of the PCI compliance out of your hair. You'll always have some element of responsibility, but it can take a document, an annual document of 180 pages down to just a handful. So the convenience of working with a partner that understands the security and compliance requirements and how to meet your needs to take on as much as we can, that's one of the values. But that's not only the most, I think, the most important highlight of this experience. We worked really exciting with our partners to launch this. The partnerships are absolutely the key to success for our payment strategies. You know, we have long-term strategic partnerships with companies like Ellucian and their 3 student information systems, or other CRM and SIS systems out there, the Anthologies, the Power Campus, the PeopleSoft and the Oracle schools. You know, it's very important to have partners that have built and tried and true solutions that plug into these student information systems. Not only that, there's oftentimes, and in Shasta's case, it was with the Foundation of California Community Colleges, we're able to leverage and expedite a contracting process because of those pre-negotiated pricing arrangements. So everything was really lining up for a very efficient process to conduct and get them live as soon as possible. In fact, we even aligned with one of our strategic partners, Doctums Global, who is a management information consulting group that can really define and support projects and consulting opportunities for campuses around. We solicited Doctum support to really help ACI meet the high demand of schools needing to meet that March deadline. So these 3 partnerships were just an example of what started to align once we knew what our go-forward strategy is. And on the next slide, you'll see what was absolutely amazing is that we were able to bring Shasta live in 3 weeks. Now that's contract, testing, setup, penny testing, and going live for their students. Now, 3 weeks is a significantly quick time. It's not our average time, but it just makes the case of when you have a trusted partner who has strategic partners in place and has the knowledge and efficient processes to help you, we can really work together. And, in that case, obviously 3 weeks is not our typical time. It was a 75% time reduction in implementation. And again, implementations, it depends on resources on campus. It depends on time of year. Well, ultimately, again, it's all about the partnership. And, there's a quote. We have a full case study on the Shasta College experience that's available on our website, because it really just, things worked out so well, and it's something we're quite proud of. And, I think with Becky McCall, who is the AVP of IT at Shasta, I think her quote here is just it's just so relevant to what we did here, and is that we really took the time to understand their challenges, and it brought them to to a live environment to meet the needs of their students in the school as quickly as possible. It was something we're very proud of, and it was exciting for our company to be able to accomplish.
Yeah, very exciting, Scott. And as you mentioned, we had a lot of IT resources, but I've got to think that pre-negotiated agreement really helped cut down on the time, because I know that can really gum up the works and slow things down.
We all know that there's a lot of people wanting to review a contract or an agreement on campus. So those pre-negotiated agreements definitely help out in this type of situation.
Well, good to hear. All right, Scott, why don't you tell us maybe a little bit about ACI? Again, we're going to have some time here shortly for some questions and answers. So drop those into the Q&A box on the right-hand side while Scott tells us a little bit more about ACI Worldwide.
Absolutely. Now, as we're winding down, I just always think it's important for the individuals to really understand who ACI is. ACI is a global payments company, really helping individual companies in many different areas beyond higher ed and billing. We are in support of 19 of the top 20 banks worldwide, so a strong presence in the banking entity. We also work closely with over 1,500 intermediaries and merchants. I actually always say I have very little doubt when I'm talking with a group of administrators on a campus to say that their credit card, debit card, or ACH or some payment has not gone through ACI's secure processing at some point or another. I know I personally pay my daughter's tuition now through ACI, but I also pay our local water bill. So we serve a lot of different areas. And one of the things that is so important, it is a global company, but our services, especially in higher ed, are focused so specifically on this one vertical, serving over 350 schools now with a dedicated team for higher ed, many of us with campus experience. But there's one significant number that I always share. On a daily basis, more than $14 trillion goes through the ACI network. Now, much of that is in the large banking networks. Think Bank of India, Bank of China. That number is astounding. It's a third of the world's currency on a given day. And now, granted, if I was sitting on my campus thinking, wow, that's a lot of money, they have a lot more customers than perhaps I would be important to them. I always share this. Think of the security and the procedures in place we have as a company to move the money efficiently, effectively, and securely, with also a dedicated team focused on higher ed. It's really a great solution, a great support, and for 10 years, something I've been very proud to be part of the team for.
Yeah, good point, Scott. And as I mentioned earlier, we also do payment processing for the IRS. We're one of just a very few companies that they trust to manage their payments. So 14 trillion is a lot, but I guess to maybe make it a little bit more relevant for our audience, if you've gone to a hamburger fast food restaurant or ordered a pizza or wear some fashion, we definitely have processed your payment. So.
Yep. And we're not brand new. We've been around for 45 plus years. And, so we've evolved and we know what we're doing.
Yep. All right, one more slide. Again, a little bit about our research. Again, we've been very happy to share some of this research with you today. I'm going to drop into the chat for everybody a link that will take you right here to the interactive ACI SpeedPay Pulse site, where you'll find all of our consumer data. You can dig in by generation, by year. You can also click and download the annual report, which you see there on the right. So make sure you take some time to check it out, share it with your friends. And again, our fall survey is in the field right now. So later this year, probably around the holidays, we're going to have a fresh set of data uploaded to the site. So stay tuned for more on that. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to our host, Stephen, to see what kind of questions have come in.
All right, perfect. Yeah, but first, thank you, Steve and Scott, for your presentation. That was really great. I appreciate it. So now, yes, we've come to the audience Q&A portion of our webinar today, and you can now send in your questions. And so Steve and Scott, they can answer your questions live on the air. If you haven't already, you can send in your questions in writing, and you can do that by accessing the Q&A panel that we have right there. It's on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. It's the option next to the chat button. And if you can't see it, there should be 3 dots next to chat panel. Click on that, and that should bring you to the Q&A panel. All right, so I do have a question that came in about one of the the graphs on an earlier slide. I don't know, you mentioned, you just put in the link to the actual survey results in the chat. I didn't know if you wanted to go over them now. It's on slide 22. I don't know if you still have control of the slides right now, so you should be able to go back up a little bit. Yeah. Okay,
So
yeah, they're just
alternative payment
yeah,
methods.
wondering about the bar graph on the left, what all the other
Yeah.
numbers and percentages are. Yeah.
Yeah, again, we started to survey consumers about their interest in alternative payment methods in our 2020 survey. We did not have that question in 18 or 19. So again, you can see you've got 2 bars from 2020, our 2 surveys from 21, and then the 46% is from our spring 22 survey. And then the numbers on the right are where we've taken the spring results and broken it out by generation. And hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome. Perfect. And if not, they can reach out to me again and I'll send that or follow
Yeah,
up
or they
to
can
you.
reach out to me directly. You can see my email address down here at the bottom of the slide.
Perfect. All right, let's see. Another question they were wondering, so at the college at Shasta, they're wondering if you know what student information system they use.
Sure. Shasta was a Lucian school using Colleague. So they were staying with their Colleague solution, and we were the strategic partner. We had a long-standing relationship supporting Colleague schools from the Datatel days, and so we were able to really leverage hundreds of schools that are with Colleague to make sure that those were going quickly. The implementation went quickly.
Oh, right. Perfect. And actually, before I go to my next question, I'll just say that since I've been getting a lot of private messages, yes, you will receive a copy of the slides here today via email from us at UB at some point tomorrow. And you'll also get an on-demand video.
And I'm going to just jump into this one other response because it's right here. The question is, have we worked with schools that use Banner SIS? And the answer is yes, absolutely. We have a long-standing Ellucian strategic partnership supporting Colleague, Banner, Power Campus, as well as all of the other solutions and product sets affiliated with the Ethos system, and that goes true. That stands true with the other SIS systems outside of Ellucian. Again, the anthology and the growing anthology world, well beyond what was campus management, the PeopleSoft, as well as the Oracle Cloud initiative that PeopleSoft is doing, as well as some of the others that are either homegrown support, Genzabar, CAMS for that matter. Yeah, we have the ability to support basically any student information system or even CRM that you've adapted into your community.
Awesome. Perfect. All right, let's see. This next question looks like this one's for you, Steve. So this person was asking, what can they do to make the payment process less complicated and stressful for students? Pretty important question there.
Yeah, absolutely. As we saw, it is a stressful experience, especially for Gen Z. Basically, to give them the information that they need in one place. Whether it's regarding their tuition, their bookstore purchases, any of their other on-campus things. As Scott mentioned, show them the details if they've added or dropped a class. If you can provide that all in one picture, along with their student aid, when their payments due, what payment plans they have set up, they can answer a lot of their own questions and not have to call and wait on hold, not have to stand in line, and have that confidence that they're making the payment correctly, they're making it on time. So again, give them the information, make it easy to understand, consolidate it in one place, and that's going to eliminate a lot of the stress.
And I'd add one more thing, Steve, and that's making the payment process simple and convenient doesn't always benefit just the student. It certainly benefits your staff and your team members in your controller, bursar, student accounts offices. One of the things that we work with very closely is that the the payments ecosystem on campus is really complex. It can be everything from your tuition and fees, parking, events, alumni donations, but extends into, lab fees or student study abroad application fees. So you want to make payment processes convenient with a consolidated approach. Convenient for students, but also convenient for reconciliation and and balancing payment and budget sheets and your daily banking reports, your reconciliation on a daily basis. A little plug about ACI. One thing that I think was very helpful for our schools is that we have something that's called integrated treasury management. What that ITM does is it allows schools to be funded by all of their funding sources the next business day. So what comes in on Monday through ACH, Visa, MasterCard, Discovery, Amex, and any other of the alternative payment methods, while historically they'd come in at different dates and time over the course of a few days because they settle at different times, ACI settles it, essentially pre-funding it for the institution, all so it can be settled the next day. So matching your balance sheets. Just a way that we find it convenient for our support of the schools and the reporting and the all the daily tasks that you have while you're serving these important functions at this institution.
Perfect. And one other question just came in while you were talking. So at this particular institution, whatever platform they're using, they've noticed that they've seen quite a few payments being declined as, processor declined. Do you know what that means or generally?
Sure. So, there's a number of reasons why payments would be declined, and it does depend on the channel in which they were paid. Insufficient fees is one of the most popular ways of decline. That's obviously with your ACH or your debit. But so I'd have to explore that a little bit more. One thing with the Nacha validation rules that helped is that there were actually less declines because of these validations that were put into place. Declines are always an issue, but I do think technology has helped schools and offices for any industry really create better business processes. So if declines are a real high problem for you, I'd absolutely suggest contacting. My email is also on the screen here. Feel free to give me a message, send me a message. Either myself or somebody on my team would be happy to talk and see if there's anything that either from a best business case approach we would suggest, or even a solution that we may be able to assist with.
Perfect. And I see we do have one more question left, and I'll just say, since we do have a few minutes, if you haven't already, there's still some time if you'd like Steve or Scott to answer your questions on the air. So again, input them into the Q&A or chat, and we will get to them. All right, let's see. So this last question that we have at the moment, so at this particular institution, their budgets are very strained. Looks like for 2023, as it is with everywhere else, basically. So what can they do to reduce the costs to accept payments? And I think this is for you, Scott.
Sure, I'd be happy to take that. So the cost of payments it depends on a number of factors. Again, different channels range in the expense of them. But one of the first things that we work with schools when they're really looking at cutting costs is, are you absorbing the fees for all types of payments? Are you absorbing credit card processing fees, debit fees, ACH fees? If you are, would your board or would your school be willing to consider perhaps either passing those fees on as a service fee, or what I'm finding very common today, creating a hybrid model where perhaps you allow students to pay by, or students and families and sponsors to pay by ACH for free, but you pass a credit or debit card on to the payer for the service fee. That's one simple solution. Another way is really evaluate your payments partner. Payment partners are able to create models for you that can work with your school and your institution size. ACI is pretty unique in the sense that we actually do not have an annual licensing fee. We're a SaaS model that, for the most part, the only charge is that of the processing itself. So again, that absorbed or service fee. We have schools that we've aligned and partnered with that their decision was to pass fees onto the students and payers for all types of payments. So in fact, we're a free service to that institution. Not to say that might be the one size fits all solution, but there are a number of ways that we can discuss ways in which payments or the costs can be reduced.
Oh, right. Perfect. So it looks like that's all of the questions that we have right now. That said, as I go through my closing slides in just a few moments, please feel free to continue submitting your questions if any come to mind, and I'll make sure that they're sent over to Scott and Steve so they can be answered at some point in the future. Please feel free to use this time to do so. But first off, I'd like to thank you again, Scott and Steve, for your time here. And of course, thank you to ACI. And to you, our audience, I would also like to thank you for joining us here today with us. For those of you who enjoyed what you saw, there are many more upcoming web seminars like this one that are provided by us at University Business, which is the leader in editorial coverage of news, trends, and current issues in higher ed. We have a wide range of readers who subscribe for free to UB, and they stay up to date with us online in our newsletters, as well as web seminars like this one. Also, if you would, and I've mentioned it a few times before, but for those of you who believe that, what you saw here would be helpful to your colleagues, as I'm sure that's the case, you'll be pleased to know that our team at UB, we will be sending you an email at some point later tomorrow. And in that email, it'll be a on-demand recording of this web seminar and the link to the slides. So with that, on behalf of UB, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks, everyone. Take care, be well, and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.